they always knew we are all divine. We are divine. The divine created itself in time and space. And I love the Sufi mystics' understanding of the universe, of life, is that there is the one world that is pure intelligence, pure spirit, no form, no symbol, no image, no form, but it's pure intelligence.
Welcome to the Consciousness of the Way. I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing, and I have an incredible guest here today. As I always put it, it's Christmas Day. I go down to the tree and look what the universe has brought me, this incredible being. I'm so grateful to welcome to the podcast today, Betty Kovac. I want to also be very mindful that she is a deep seeker and educator in all mythology and other things that are of the divine nature that come right down to the visceral experience of linguistics and symbols and things of that nature, and a very well-known author in this very understanding. Welcome to the podcast, my dear friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really, really grateful to have you here today. On a brief note, what I'd like you to do is just share with the audience how you got to this very moment right now.
Oh, yes. Well, in my case, since I'm quite old, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it short. I think that all my life, from the youngest memories that I have, my brother and I always were trying to figure it all out. How come all this, we'd think, how did this come about? And of course, we weren't watching television because that was, our childhood was long before television. And I think radio, my father listened to the news maybe once or twice a week. And we had one show, 30 minutes on Sunday, Gene Autry, but we were outside all the time, out in nature, playing and creating stories and always wondering, what's the meaning behind all this? Why are we here? What is the purpose really of it all? And so that really has guided me all my life. And, in those years, we didn't hear conversations like this. We didn't, in the schools or wherever we went, or churches, we didn't hear this deep seeking of the meaning of things. And I went to university because it's the only place I knew to go to try to figure things out. And I went to a religious school, and that was good. But there was also the scientific worldview that was very dominant everywhere, that there's nothing but matter. We're just a fluke of nature, no meaning, no purpose, forget it, you're dead, you're dead. That seemed deadly, as it truly is. To give our children that message is so destructive. And there was the religion. And it was beautiful. There were wonderful things that I was taught as a child. But even then, I wanted to experience it. I didn't want it taught to me. I thought, there's got to be a way to experience it, because our whole lives out in nature was experience. It wasn't from a book. So that's kind of how I got where I am now. I continued to study, and I thought, well, let's see, I'm not learning much here. I'll study religion. Let's go deeper than that. Let's go to mythology and symbolic language. And that was good, and ritual. And so that, I think, led me to a much earlier way of being in the world, of which you were so much a part of. And the European world was very much a part of before it was destroyed. And that helped me, because I saw that our ancestors loved the earth and knew that it had consciousness and wanted to know its laws and co-create with it. So that was very helpful to me.
Wow. It's almost like forgotten the deeper nature of the seeker's realization through the facet or the sort of like funnel that people find through being motivated by a scripture, by a belief system, by even, I would say, even a religion, because that's still being browbeaten today. But let's be honest, believing in something is better than nothing.
Exactly.
And so cyclically through human history, we've gone through spirituality, atheism, religion, and it seems to be the human timeline. And I feel like today it's sort of, the spiritual awakening where we're at, is beautiful, yet it still doesn't have to be limited to. I really love the way that you've sort of discovered it through your own journey in this lifetime, and how important the seekers' understanding and those roots of whatever they're immersing themselves in, whatever they're resonating with, and it comes in the form of words, letters, numbers, symbols. It becomes visceral. It becomes a self-evident realization through that journey. What was the one thing that you went deep into mythology? What was the most profound catalyst for that?
For doing that, for going into mythology, well, since I taught literature, I could see that mythology is highly symbolic. And I taught fairy tale, which is even more symbolic sometimes than myths, because myths will often have human biology or biography or in history, but at the core, it's symbolic. So I knew that symbolism I learned from Carl Jung on the way. I was very grateful to meet this man who was a scientist, but also a visionary and had many visions himself. And he understood that there is an intermediate world whose language is symbolic language. We could say, well, it's the right brain and the heart that speak to us in a different language from the conceptual language of the left brain. It speaks to us in the language of symbols. So I wanted to study these most concentrated forms of that symbolism. And of course, he made me very interested in dreams, but he also said, this symbolism is not random. It is not created, constructed by the left brain. It is organized by the deeper forces of the human psyche or soul. In other words, this language coming from the intermediate world is not random. It's highly organized. And as a mythologist, I learned that their myths are similar all around the world, or so are the fairy tales. And that gave me a very deep understanding, I would say, of the mythical experience of our past. It was really, as I think it was Robert Graves said, mythology is somebody else's religion. It does actually reflect their spiritual experiences. So it was wonderful with the classes in the 60s, which was this great revolution taking place as today. And so the students and I was young, sometimes they couldn't tell me from the rest of the students. So we had a great time in looking at artifacts, archaeological artifacts and texts, and discovering the incredible spiritual structure of these myths and fairy tales.
Wow. You're sort of cross-sectioning quite a few things that are so relevant today in the seeker's journey. And so, you get deeper into the psyche, the conscious and unconscious processes that happen with the separation and the merging of the left and right brain, what that center point, that versica point, that point of all things, the origin. And so within Taoism, we speak of the breath in and out, right? And between the breath in and out, yin and yang, is the center point, is the stillness, what we call the Wu Ji. That Wu Ji is the mother of all things, the Tao. And so it's like this perfection that is generated. Now, you mentioned Carl Jung. Did you study with him at all, or you just...
No, he actually, it's interesting because when I was in college, I dated a man who had just become a Lutheran minister, and he had gone to the seminary, which I think now is attached to Yale. What is the name of it? I don't remember. Oh, Andover? Newton. Kim knows. Always when I forget a word or a name, she's like, I need a chip in the brain. It's Kim. But at any rate, so he had a party to celebrate that, and he invited many of his friends, all men from Andover Newton, but they brought their girlfriends, and there I was with him. And so the party was wonderful. It was a discussion of Carl Jung, mathematics, physics, and mythology and symbolism, and I knew nothing. I thought this is amazing, but I knew enough to keep my mouth shut and learn. And so afterwards, it was just so fascinating to me. And afterwards, I said, "Who is this Carl Jung?" And he took me into his library, and I borrowed a lot of books, but the two most important books were by Carl Jung. One was what is it? Man's Modern Man's Search for Soul and the Individuated Self. But the real one was Modern Man's Search for the Soul. And I thought, well, if I have a search for anything, it's for my soul. And so I started reading that. And I must say that for a long time, I wasn't sure of everything that I was reading, but I kept reading it. I couldn't talk to anyone about it because I didn't understand it enough. And then later, I met him in my dreams. And he became like a mentor in my dreams. But I was reading him too. But the dreams were very, very powerful. And that was a real source of discovering my soul, I would say. The reality of it, the experience of it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me like you sort of delved deep into sort of this esoteric, mystical sort of realization that most people, especially within Taoism, they sort of start with the metaphysics and then delve deep into the knowing of what it really means. It goes beyond philosophy. It becomes this visceral, kinesthetic
Precisely.
experience. It's
Yeah.
now validated by the user, it's self-evident. And
Exactly.
so when you talk about his work, I find it interesting because there's always this sort of like, oh, he was a contemporary, or perhaps was a student of Sigmund Freud, or what was the relationship that they had? Were they?
Well, the relationship was of two professionals. He was not a student of Freud, although he honored Freud and studied his works. But they eventually separated because Jung felt that Freud would not go deep enough. He would not challenge certain views and really go deep into the source of what was going on. So they did separate, but Jung always regarded him as the father, you might say, of psychoanalysis. But and I tried studying Freud when I was younger too, but I couldn't stay with it, and that's why I went to discovered Jung accidentally. It was that he asked the question I had asked all my life, and Freud did not.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I find it interesting. I always go back to that. I think it's sort of like it's what they call a meme these days within social media, where it's oh, you got an oral fixation. You didn't get enough of this, that, or something else when you were a child. That's why you're smoking. And so this is kind of like an interesting sort of like. You kind of take or leave Sigmund at that point.
Yeah, it's kind of a trivialization of ourselves.
Right, right. And so when you identified how powerful that was, moreover, since the discovery of the human DNA strand back in the 60s, and then we sort of fast forward to a discovery in the early 90s about how within the DNA strand they deciphered using the periodic table actual language. And I don't know whether you're familiar with the God spark or God code that was within the DNA strand. So they actually deciphered it using the periodic table, and the message was very clear within that, which was in God in this body, God in this body. And it's like, you can't make this stuff up. It's like, excuse me, what? But moreover, it's like everything is a word, number, symbol, letter. And I always remind people it's deep embedded at a subatomic level within you. And this is why you gravitate to certain words, you gravitate to certain numbers, experiences, scripture, symbols. It's just part inherently who you really are. So when you share all these things with me on your journey leading up to this point, the epiphany at some point for you must have been, oh my goodness, I've known this my whole life. Or did you ever have that moment where you're like, I've always known this?
Yes. And, you know, in my first book, Miracle of Death, I talk about the deaths in my family and our communication with our son after his death. And that was always, it would be even he, when he would tell us things. And my husband hadn't been interested in this before, but with the death, he started having visions too. And our son, Ph.D, would say, Dad, remember? It was always remember. It wasn't like he was trying to tell him something. It was like trying to get him to remember to remember. And so, yes, it was, I think our ancestors knew this because they always knew we are all divine. We are divine. The divine created itself in time and space. And I love the Sufi mystics' understanding of the universe, of life, is that there is the one world that is pure intelligence, pure spirit, no form, no symbol, no image, no form, but it's pure intelligence, pure spirit. But it is always coming into being in that intermediate world. And the moment it touches that world, it is shaped by the laws or the archetypes, the laws of nature or the universe, whatever you want to call it, of consciousness. And then it continues to move on into matter. And that's why our ancestors knew we are all pure spirit. We are all divine. And if we understand this, the laws, the archetypal structures that allows us to come into being, and we live our lives co-creating within those laws, then we are divine co-creating with the divine. And I love that. I think their understanding of it is that through the heart, which is, we now know, even our science knows today, it's the fifth brain component, but we of course wiped that out for centuries. But the heart knows that language perfectly. And if we go through the heart consciousness, it opens us to that archetypal world. And that's how we can only know, the Egyptians knew this too, our ancestors, especially the Egyptians knew it very well, that we can only know certain laws through love. If we don't love and go through the heart, we can't understand those laws. And there's a wonderful symbolic image of that in ancient Egyptian spirituality, is that the goddess, the serpent goddess, could destroy whole worlds. Or if you desired her and loved her, you could co-create with her the world, and you would know her laws. I thought that was, when I first read that, I realized that I thought that's so true, so brilliant, that there's certain laws of the universe you can't know intellectually. You have to know them through the heart, through love and desire. And then we can create, co-create.
That is so beautiful. I mean, it's like within Taoism, we refer to perfection, the mother. Everything is like a bellows. It contracts and expands.
Mm-hmm.
Always.
In and out, yeah.
Ending, never exhausted, never limited. Yet man is not like that. Man is limited. And when you identify with that flesh and blood, that humanness, you'll be subject to the experience of the duality that you are in right now as an expression of the universe contracting and expanding. And it sort of ripples right down to what you speak of, the heart, right? The heartbeat, contracting and stillness, contracting and stillness, expanding and contracting, expanding and contracting. It's in all things, as above as below. Something that would be more a humatic sort of like reference, but generally speaking, that's the nature of everything.
And yet, within this duality, these polarities, our ancestors said, you know, zero, the circle is nothing. And out of nothing comes the one. And out of that one, in matter, it divides into the polarities, the two. But the great creative act is on a much higher level of bringing the two together into the third, which, as the German poet Goethe said, is a new, a third, a new, a completely unanticipated other. So that is our work as co-creators, is to bring these, work with the polarities and allow them to give birth to that totally unexpected other, which includes both of them. You know, in the Mystic, they say, it isn't that there is the darkness and the light, it's that the darkness is the light. So it's hard for us to understand.
Oh, not at all. I mean, with the Taoism, it's quite clear. Between the breath in and the breath out is yin and yang. The center point is the wuji, which is the stillness, which evolves into effortless action, which would be representative of all rivers return back to the ocean, which is the mother of all things.
Exactly.
So, you know, within Taoism, we use many different rituals of cultivation, but one comes to mind for me is cultivating using what we call the Ru Yi, the Ryu, and it's a scepter, and it's in the that has a head of and shape of the uterus, which is the center point, and we refer to the creation of life as the 9 stages of all things, from concept, consciousness, knowing, unconscious knowing, to being one with all, and then the 4 stages of the polarizing effects of all the metals, platinum, gold, silver, merging as one, the merging of conscious and unconscious, the rippling, mirroring effects of that, hitting up to the number 9 being the highest point, and you are at the state of being everything. No place, no person, no thing, no title, just the now, the present moment. It's so profound when we have these conversations because it all returns back, in my opinion, to that center point. No matter where you're coming from, no matter, as we always say within Taoism, there's a million ways up the mountain, and there's no right or wrong. There just is.
I like that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's you mentioned Sufi ism. Do you focus on that as something that you cultivate, or is it all a culmination of all things that bring you to your own realization?
It's part of it. I was so amazed to go back to our ancestors when they fought in this way, you know, in the West. I focused on the West. And so then, of course, Sufism became a part of the Great Awakening in the High Middle Ages. I talk in my book, Merchants of Light, about the fact that our ancestors had this deep and profound understanding and co-creativity with the universe. But then when the church came in, the Roman church, it mimicked what the Deuteronomist had done to the Jewish tradition. Margaret Barker, who's an Old Testament scholar, has shown with great detail that the first temple in Judaism was a shaman mystic tradition. And about 621 BCE, a group of people came in called the Deuteronomist. We don't know too much about them, but they destroyed that system of experiencing the divine. And of course, the mother was very much a symbol for that tradition, and she was throughout nature. And the tree, of course, was a major symbol of the feminine, the mother, and the tree was everywhere with both the male and female God, you know, saying, here it is, eat of this tree, accept the wisdom of nature and of love. And the Deuteronomists came in and, of course, told the dreadful story. They inverted that myth of the tree of life into a tree of good and evil that you absolutely were forbidden to eat of. And of course, the human being always wants to know something, so of course they ate of it. And any parent knows if you say don't eat from that tree, that's exactly where the person will go. But at any rate, so then they were condemned as sinners, and their children would be sinners, and they no longer had the worthiness to live in nature, in the garden of life, and they were expelled. This is the most dreadful, wretched inversion of a sacred story. But the point is that the Deuteronomists switched everything around. Now it's no longer experience. That's nothing. You follow the law. And then the Jews had their own awakening, Renaissance, you might say, with a group of probably mystics, or the Therapeutae, the Essenes, and the birth of Jesus, whether he was historical or not. He was historical in the sense that such mystics existed, and they were a resistance to the Second Temple because they carried on the tradition of the first Gnostic experiential tradition. So then here the Roman Church comes along, it takes Christianity and completely inverts again the story of Jesus. Jesus, we know from the Nag Hammadi text, shows so much about the origins of Christianity, but in those texts, Jesus makes it clear that he did not come to save us. No, he came to remind us of who we are and how we can experience that. Well, this is, of course, the church demanded that all such texts be destroyed or they would destroy them. They were buried, thank heavens, and that's how we found them after World War II. But of course, that we found the Dead Sea Scrolls too. That was a later form of Judaism. Those who resisted the Second Temple and held on to the mystical views of the First Temple. But at any rate, there we were. They had destroyed that. So the Roman Church then converted Jesus into a god. You know, it wasn't telling us. In the Nag Hammadi text, it says it's not enough to follow the Christ. You must become the Christ. Well, that's not for the church. The church, no. We are souls who are evil or who are sinful. We need to be saved. And this is a God. Jesus is a God, and you must worship him, follow him. And by the way, we have the rules for you to follow. In case you don't know them, we have the laws for you to follow in order to get to heaven, so to speak. So this went on for over 700 years. I mean, nothing could be spoken or couldn't have a text that said otherwise. But in the High Middle Ages, around 1000 in Europe, there was this awakening, partly because probably of Cordova, which was an Islamic group or city in Spain. I mean, people all over Europe would go there to hear the Jewish masters, the Christian masters, and Islamic. So it really had a powerful influence. But I think also that at that time, the human psyche couldn't bear this anymore. This polarity was missing. There was nothing but a male god, and you had to follow him. And of course, what happened in the High Middle Ages is that feminine is everywhere. You know, she's teaching the man so many things. I love the story, which is so typical of these stories during the High Middle Ages, is that the knight is going to be married, and of course he's married to the most beautiful woman you can imagine. And so the ceremony takes place, and then they go back to their room at night, and suddenly she becomes the most heinous hag you could ever imagine. Missing teeth, I mean, terrible. Whatever you can imagine is the ugliest, that's what she is. And she says to him, you know, I can be this at night with you, or I can be the beautiful woman at night with you and the hag at court. Which do you choose? And the beauty of the story is that he's smart enough to say, my beloved, the choice is yours. And so he breaks that patriarchal, dominating rule of law. But these are stories like that all the way through the High Middle Ages. They bring back the mother and nature. But of course, the church destroys it. And as I say in Merchants, the Italian Renaissance also is ignited by experience through the Corpus Hermetica that they found. It was ignited by that same search. And then, of course, that died out. And then there were the scientists and mystics who came together in the 1600s. Here they were. It's that Renaissance again. And they were destroyed. Their texts were destroyed. Everything was destroyed. And when science came into being in 1660 with the Royal Society, they knew they could not say anything about anything other than matter. Spirit, consciousness, forget it. These people have been killed because of it. So they knew not to. And that's why we have a science of materialism. And now with quantum physics, we know that that was very limited. So thank God we now have a science. It begins to be worthy of something deeper.
So that's interesting. You bring up the science aspect because I'm coming from my background in teaching people Taoist alchemy for over 30 years as a Taoist priest. It seems, I always tell people anyone that has an absolute about face and run in the other direction. Most people tend to keep to that one path as the absolute, right? And I feel like that seeking that you've had to embody your whole conscious experience throughout your life has not been limited by this absolute truth to all things. And I think science and physics is starting to get there, as if, listen to me, I know what the truth is, I measure it, this is the answer. And I really find that problematic for the seeker, because if you listen closely, these are all theories, ladies and gentlemen, John.
And it's been ruthless, because I taught in college, if you even thought you might say something in opposition to the materialistic theory, you were considered totally ignorant, and less than.
Right. And so, right now, today, there's many different things that are being questioned by just the simplicity of the periodic table and what that actually means from a validated sort of element perspective within the construct of this version of the universe, and what that actually means, and where it's going from a straight line to a circular in nature, which would be returning to the circle that we speak of. So, so many things through Leonardo da Vinci's research or discovering, it's attempting to seek and find the meaning to life through the numbers, through the frequencies, through the energies, and then falling short because of the Plato's Platonic solid sort of like theory that was sort of perpetrated and propaganded sort of into a state of human history that you must believe in the churches we just spoke on, and those straight lines are the answer to all things, when in actuality everything within nature is circular and fractal in its processes. Yet that fundamental fact is being questioned right as we speak, especially in the last week or so within social media. It's been quite evident. But I've known that my whole natural born life, and I've known that through all my training as a Taoist that has gone back for generations, for thousands of years. I'm even going to say tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. And people are like, that's ridiculous. There's only a timeline of 6,000. Well, listen, I don't know how much is valid at this point. We're questioning what the timeline of a human being is. I've had people on my channel that have discovered the origins of human life form, the same shape that we're in right now, that's 1 million years old.
It's like the forbidden archaeology.
Right.
Yeah, that's just not dealt with, because it's not part of the program right now. Although I do see an understanding of the circular, the spiral, the coming into being, and so on. And I do see in quantum physics just such a much deeper understanding, because it's a multidimensional world. You can't get out of that. And if a particle connects on one level, it's connected everywhere it is, wherever it is. So I see some real hope in a much deeper understanding of that, but most people don't know about it yet. They say it takes 100 years for people to really catch on to a new understanding, but we don't have that kind of time, in terms of, I think it's the fifth renaissance of this underground tradition of the alchemist and the Hermetist and the Kabbalist and mystic Christianity. I think it has risen up again, and at the same time, that light has drawn up the darkness that has actually constructed itself through the limitations that it was given by the inverted stories. I think that, if we think, as parent, we know there's certain stories that will destroy the child. You can't say that there's no purpose to what you're doing or who you are, no meaning whatsoever. It's that the brain can't accept it, the heart can't accept it. And yet, many people have been brought up with that. And I think that they've constructed a lot of darkness that we now have to deal with. That the history of the Western world, if I stick to that, has been a history of not experience. You don't have the right to experience anything. You must follow the law, and we will tell you what that is. And they have constructed a story about who we are that is so destructive, so filled with violence and horror, that our children have been damaged. And now they want to rule the world, be in charge of everything and everybody. So I think that it's a time of when the two polarities are very tense, confronting each other.
Yeah, I believe it. It's like you get to a certain point where the Jade Emperor, one of my teachers, would always say, "Let the man who's never left his village, let him know he's seen the world." It's all here. It's all here.
Right.
The seeking goes no further. You go within. You don't go outside. It's not an external experience. It's an internal experience.
Yes. Yes. And I think that our ancestors insisted on this, and I think they're absolutely right, that we are divine, as I mentioned before, and we are immortal. The consciousness does not die, and we are creators. We have that extraordinary responsibility to co-create with nature, with the universe. If we don't do our part, we hurt nature. I had a vision one time that the mother, the great mother, came to me. I was lying on the couch and suddenly she was there and she sang to me. And always the way they sing in a vision, I think it does, at a given point, it opens up a language with the vibrations that are so powerful. But she sang, "Create your worlds to keep me well. Create your worlds to keep me well." It just so penetrated my soul to hear that. That's our responsibility. Not exploit her, but create our worlds with her so that she can be creative too.
So powerful. You mentioned your dreams. So do you consciously perceive channeling information, or you feel like you get it more, organically, intuitively through your dreams to get messaging, or do you just speak in a terminology like my intuition is speaking to me on this?
But when I was younger, especially, and I was so in search, I really dreamed a lot and I recorded them. I don't dream as much today as I did then, but I think I have other ways of receiving information. But when I was really searching, the dreams were so powerful. And thank heavens I had read and continued to read Carl Jung. And as a matter of fact, we had a Jung Society here in Claremont after I was already out of school and had a child and my husband, and we had it here in Claremont, the Jung Society of Claremont, and I was program director for a while and then director, and we brought people who were not Jungians necessarily, but from all walks of life. It was a wonderful group of people, and to experiment and sort of explore all ways. And dreams, of course, being one. But I think that, no, I don't channel. I feel that sometimes I think when I'm writing, how did I know that? And then I think, well, of course, because that other dimension is working with us all the time. So I would think intuitively it flows through. And sometimes I think how great it would be. I hear people saying, all these things I did during the visions. I was with our son, my husband and I both. for hours sometimes, and tremendous amount of information came through, which I recorded, have a huge book of it. And Miracle of Death was based on the experiences we both had, and I wanted it to be accurate and not, exaggerated in any way. So I used those recordings when I wrote the book. But so that was a very powerful few years of just extraordinary communication and experience. After that, it was more intuitive. And someone says, well, do you have those experiences with your son and your husband now? And I have to say no, but I feel I had an experience in which they wanted to teach me that they're always present. When you love, you're never separated from that love, from that consciousness of love. And they even were kind of joking about, that we're in your heart. You couldn't get rid of us if you wanted to, like we're here. And there were only a few times that I had that horrible sense of death and separation. And it lasted like for a day. And then I had a young woman here from Hungary. And so I showed her the film of a Hungarian man who was very helpful to the Jews during the World War II. And I was just feeling so destitute. I had that horrible feeling that people often feel when someone has died, so separated. And so when the film was over, she went in the kitchen to make us a cappuccino. And suddenly I could hear them laughing. Well, what do you think? Can you let us back in now? It was sort of like, when you don't feel that, we're here. And we're here all the time. But we had to show you that's the difference.
Yeah, it's a channeling thing. For me, I started channeling directly Lao-Tzu about 30 years ago, and he's my teacher today. I don't claim to know anything. Like the great emperor, the great emperor always says, one of my teachers, he says, when you accept you know nothing, you know everything.
True. That was Socrates as well, when you can admit that you don't know something. But I wanted to ask you, because I knew that you channeled, do you receive information about where we are now and what we're going through and how we...
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the beginning of this year, a lot of people would come to be students and people of the channel and want Lao-Tzu's insight. And Lao-Tzu was very clear, and he'll go a little deeper, but he's quite cheeky when he's communicating. So he says, imagine you're like a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today? And people are like, what? Fall back into the beach and be realized. And so people are like, holy moly. Then he goes further into, you are identifying with the human experience that would be perceived as the very limited beliefs that are creating the construct of your everyday mundane life, controlled by emotion. You will experience, and this has been validated through other things, I'll share this in a minute, we will experience 9 times the frequency of the sun more than ever in human history over the next 12 to 18 months. And I'm like, whoa, okay, now he speaks in the cosmos. He doesn't speak in the myopic.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, he identifies a human being as an ambassador of the earth. This is an expression of the universe. We are here as another facet of consciousness, of the consciousness of the diamond, which is perfection. And we embody and create the coherence of the Earth's transmission through the magnetic field by how we resonate with our mental emotional state. And so that frequency for the Earth is unfortunately the death, destruction, demise, and the fear that is loomingly sort of like evident within the news media is going to fall very short, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we're not going to have World War III. We're not going to have death and destruction. We're not going to have all... He's very adamant about these things, that the resonance is coming high. Now, this sounds like a very bold prediction for where things are if you look at the world stage, right? Now, I have a friend of my channel who reads the Schumann resonance of the Earth, and I'm very familiar with it through Lao-Tzu's teaching. He shares that with me. But the Earth's frequency is 7.83 hertz, which would be equivalent to the alpha or theta brainwave. right? So the earth is an expression of the human being. So that brainwave state, which is the resonance of the earth, 7.83 hertz, would put you in a theta brainwave state. And if you are standing on planet Earth, the circadian rhythm will represent that. Now, of course, if you're distorted with your thoughts and you're not just emanating the actual resonance of the earth, it could be manipulated. But generally speaking, if you think of nothing and you just become present, you will represent this 7.8 hertz frequency, which is a theta brainwave, which basically means, in essence, you access your ability to merge your conscious and unconscious and create the ability to change PTSDs, things that are more embedded in the unconscious process, and erase those, reshape them, and change your whole projection of what you perceive reality to be. Now, what's funny about this is there is an artificial manipulation of the Schumann resonance right now that is bringing the resonance to a 12 to 18 hertz frequency. Now, if we understand brainwaves, that is a high beta, highly myopic, anxiety-based state to be in for a human being. You wake up that way in the morning, your brain creates serotonin, you want to go about your day. Now, if you have excessive anxiety and fear and emotions that are controlling your behavior, high beta will become problematic. If you add sugar, caffeine, other things of that nature, you're going to have a bad day. If you stay in that frequency, right now it's being manipulated. It's between 12 and 18 hertz. So what does that mean? It means that everyone is on the edge of their seat in anxiety, and the fear is being basically manipulated. Now,
created
through the news media and other
exactly
ways. Now, the good thing is, and this is where Lao Tzu had mentioned this higher, the 9 times the frequency of the sun in human history in the next 12 to 18 months. The frequency of the Earth's field is actually going to move to a 40 to 60 hertz frequency over the next 12 to 18 months through reading the Schumann resonance. So this would be very much in line with what he had mentioned in relation to how things are going to change. So what would that mean in the structure of the earth? That would mean that we have some highly evolved, highly conscious people that are staying in that state, because brain waves and gamma brain waves are representative of the brain being merging as one. You're completely conscious. That means that at a gamma brain wave, you're highly conscious, but you can actually alter alpha, theta, delta, epsilon. You can access all those brain waves at the same time. Now, I've been measuring my brain waves for decades in relation to when I channel Lao Tzu. I get in 100 to 400 hertz frequency. And so with that is crazy things take synchronicities like physical healings, mental, emotional healings, spiritual. There's a synchronicity that takes place when you get into that brainwave state. So when you're asking about what is the future of humanity from Lao Tzu's perspective, it's looking quite bright. That actual lower frequency, or the evidence of potential ominous evil sort of like doers, because that's really where that frequency is at. It's sort of like a representation of something negative,
exactly.
which it is not. And quite frankly, from his perspective, knowing that he's accessing the mother and giving me direct information. So for me, it's a monologue. When I get the information from the mother, it's a monologue. When I'm having a conversation with him, it's a dialogue. But ultimately, it comes back to the mother, which is all things. So there's a lot of prosperity and positivity that is basically the road for humanity in the next 12 to 24 months, and not the death and destruction, the destruction of the financial system, the world as we know it, World War III, all these things. This cannot sustain this resonance.
No, it could not, if the resonance is there. And that's part of my meditation always, that the meditation will be of a frequency, that they simply won't be able to accomplish what they want to do. It just simply can't do it. Just like with the WHO now, who has been trying to take over the world through this health scheme, people, of course, have been working very hard to alert people of what's going on, because it's not in the media, because of course that's owned by the ones who are trying to perpetrate this. And they just couldn't bring it together. It just failed. Now they'll continue in all kinds of other ways, but that is a constant meditation, that frequency of light will be such. And in my book, which is called Merchants of Light, that also is a high frequency, which what we were experienced is that frequency is now on the earth and coming to the earth and intensifying in the earth. And that allows people of very high consciousness to be born, to exist, and to do all sorts of things. And, this information came through the I Ching to my husband. And so that was...
It sounds to me like his messaging and Lao Tzu's is kind of similar.
It's similar. And the message is from the Merchants of Light. And we realize that these merchants have come many different times. Of course, that is, these beings come at many different times when they know they can be beneficial in raising that frequency. So I'm grateful for what you said, because I really wanted to hear that.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I'm one of those. Unfortunately, I'm a spoiler, because a lot of people are going with the death and destruction. Unfortunately, Lao Tzu will not even entertain that. He's just going to be very truthful, because that's direct source. And this is the information, and it constantly rolls out that way. Every time I have a conversation with him, I publish it on my channel, and it's like he'll give you the day of the month, which is the highest resonance for the human seeker, and he'll give you all the elements and all the things that are going to happen to you on a mental, emotional, and spiritual level through these resonances that are taking place on planet Earth. So it's always an insight. It's like, okay, now I understand that. Instead of like trying to construct it into some wordsmithing manipulation of the psyche, which a lot of people that channel information tend to do or pretend to do, it's just, there you go. Here it is. Yeah. Positive thing.
I will go to your website and check that out.
Yeah, you should definitely check it out. And, I think one of the things, even though I'm not a politics guy, but I will tell you the first evidence that all of this was being foiled and will never materialize was 2016. That's the beginning and the end of it. So if everyone was to believe in all the ominous things, and you want to believe in red and blue and all the rest of it, the fact that things were revealed in 2016 to the world, and every year after that has become more evident of the operations of all these other things that are potentially attempting to take over and commandeer planet Earth, it's not going to happen. Now, whatever that comes in, and however someone gravitates to their political affiliation, which I'm not a fan of that, it doesn't bother me, whatever you do, that is the first evidence, because that evidence of that relationship and that being able to reveal everything else that's going on in the world, we would never have known about it. We would have turned around, and guess what? We would have been sleeping at the wheel, and 20, 21, 22, 23, all would have just been sort of, oh, we're just accepting our fate. Oh, well. Whereas there's this quite clear resistance that comes in all forms. Whatever you believe in, you are being able to open your eyes to information that you had never been given before, which then makes you look at the celebrity a different way, Hollywood a different way, the world as you thought to know. I used to have a love affair with pop culture and celebrity. And quite frankly, right now, I want nothing to do with any of it, due to the fact that it's so permeated with some type of like commandeering of my very thoughts.
Exactly.
And that's really the understanding. That's the real understanding, the deep nature of what we speak of and what you understand, what you share with your readers, of the incredible mastery that you've developed over your lifetime, is an understanding that when you're emotional, you're suggestible. People need to understand that. When you're emotional, you're not conscious. And so people can take advantage of the very perception of your reality.
Well, and certainly, and those who want power know make everybody fear the virus, fear this, fear that, fear the other thing. Because once you are fearful, you are suggestible, and they use the most developed techniques of brainwashing. So they know exactly. And I think that, that's why we need to know what's going on. And then, but I think that in a way it was a blessing that I was born before TV, because for years I never had anything to do with it. And when I had a child, I didn't want him to watch certain things for sure. Although later he did, because I saw that, you can't deny someone something because then that's all they want. He did, but I just think I was never completely captivated by that kind of culture. I just was not a part of it growing up. And when I was in college, there was a TV in the lobby. We only watched it for the political debates between Kennedy and
Well,
Nixon, I guess.
remember what you just said, right? A debate. When was the last time anyone had a healthy debate? They
Yeah.
don't even teach it in school anymore. Hey,
Yeah.
why don't you learn your skills on debating your position and an insightful view of how you see things, so that you can enrich your so-called opponent or debater? No, that's not happening anymore.
No,
Your thoughts and what you think are irrelevant. You cannot think anything other than what I tell you to think. If you do, then you are banished to the mind prison that I will put you
well,
in.
absolutely. And think of in the last few years how many YouTube programs were taken off. I mean, people, you simply couldn't say things. There's that control. And yet there are people all over the world who have formed their own podcast and who are independent journalists and scientists and doctors who are saying on their own podcast, the truth that they're discovering. But when you're talking about frequency, I wanted to go back to Egypt, because I love what we, at least some scholars, are understanding about Egypt. And I think, the Egyptologists couldn't see any of the spirituality because they had a misunderstanding of evolution, and they also were materialists. So they even said the Egyptians remained barbarians and were never spiritual. And here we have this magnificent culture still standing in many ways. But Schwaller de Lubitz, he understood everything the Egyptologists said, used many of their methods, but he went much deeper into numbers and geometry and on into the architecture. And what he's discovered and made clear by who's the one, Serpent in the Sky? What is Serpent in the Sky? I can't think right now the author of that, but he took all of de Lubitz's work and made it very clear, because he's kind of hard to read. And then others have gone deep into the Egyptian spirituality. And what is so wonderful is that he said, well, they developed a sacred science. Oh, Anthony West, of course, thanks, Kim. Anthony West, Serpent in the Sky, the High Wisdom of Ancient Egypt. He took Schwaller de Lubitz's work and made it clear. And so they understood frequencies of everything, even of sage or plants, everything that they used in sacred ritual. And they knew exactly how to construct, as they did all over the world, sacred places where it was easy to be in the same frequency and then communicate with a higher dimension. But he said each temple in Egypt was constructed as a chapter in the sacred science. And when an individual entered that temple, then the frequency was such that he understood, or she, everything at once. It was the experience of that aspect of the sacred science. So it never taught or talked about or written the science, but that if you wanted to experience the wholeness of sacred science, then you went through each temple experience. I would love to have that civilization again, and I think we can and we will, but we must understand what you're talking about in terms of frequencies and how to resonate with them and live with them and transform with them, co-create with them.
Oh no, 100%. I mean, you look at Hermeticism and Rosicrucianism and Judaism and Hinduism and Taoism. there is these fundamental understandings of the seeker, the mystic, the person that's looking deeper into this sort of like deeper knowing, comes to that conclusion. And the alchemical processes that go on for the cultivational practices is where you find that resonance. So
Yes.
you define things as, light to wave to matter to particle, or moreover, you start with an energy. Everything is an energy that has a vibration, that has a
Exactly.
frequency, and you resonate there,
Yeah.
and then it will be yours. Now,
Yeah.
that practice comes from your own journey of self-realization and your ability to develop those skills, because it's not true until you say it's true, and it only becomes valid. Your truth is the only truth you need to be concerned with. And that comes down to the words, the numbers, the symbols, the letters. And for a Taoist, the Tao Te Ching is what we call the magical register, and every verse is an incantation, and each verse, each incantation has 81 different levels of consciousness, and within that it has a color, a
Yeah.
shape, and a frequency that you obtain,
Hmm.
all within that journey as a seeker. And so it becomes a very visceral experience that
Oh,
happens for the user.
and this is what has been denied to the West, that we really were thrown off our path by those who didn't know and who want to control us. And I think our children have suffered tremendously from it. We have postmodernism today as a result of not knowing that, oh, yes, there are intrinsic values. I'm sorry, you're wrong about that. There are intrinsic values. The mystics knew that when they experienced pure spirit, pure intellect. Those who know and experience the intermediate world, they know there are laws that create everything in nature. But now, cut off from that, we have a science that studied only material world. We have the so-called enlightenment that completely denied the right brain and the heart consciousness. Oh, there's only the intellect, which was devastating. And of course, postmodernism today says, well, those values failed. Yes, they failed because they didn't go through the heart, through the feeling, through the transformation of the person. So we have, and many of our children today are totally influenced by postmodernism. Yes, equality, but not based on any kind of evaluation of meaning. Everything's equal. And whatever you choose as your values, well, here's something else that's just as good. I mean, there are intrinsic values in the universe and in all life. And that's what the West lost. And many, many people are suffering tremendously from that belief. It's a dreadful belief, but it pretty much dominates popular culture today.
It's an onslaught on
Yeah, that's a word, onslaught.
it really is. On a dear friend of mine, James Tooney, who's a scholar from Ireland, a barrister out there, and his words are, it's the separation of the seeker. So when you use conscious agency, is in itself a double negative, because you're separating yourself from the actual present moment. And so he would like to refer to it as a spiritual consciousness, not this throwaway which so many people use, which is consciousness, very popular right now. And it's not understood that you are separating yourself from the present moment. When you're no place, person, or thing, first person, third person, no person, then now has no title. The universe has no moral compass. And
Yeah,
so here you have this present moment where all things can be realized, yet there is a fundamental underlying movement to separate you from yourself.
that's right. And in the visionary world, we're always told, we always experience, I should say, that there's only now in the universe. There's only now. But we can separate ourselves from that all too easily. Yes.
Right. And it seems to me that you have been traveling this journey for quite some time, gathering these incredible insight and transcribing it into these amazing books. Are you looking to work on anything right now, presently? Are you for
Well,
something in the future?
yeah, yes, I just finished, but there's still some, I have to go, you know how it is when you write a book, you've got to go through all of the, check out all the footnotes and do all that sort of thing. But I just finished a book on the evolutionary power of the heart.
Mm.
And the subtitle is, I don't remember it exactly, but it's the loss and retrieval of the blueprint for the development of our full human potential. That's lost. That was destroyed. That and the whole heart. Thank God we have heart math, which has really done wonderful scientific explorations with the power of the heart. They've
Mhm.
done so much, but we now know that the heart is the center through which all of our consciousness should flow. And when it goes through the heart, we are present in the now. And so anyway, I did write that book, and I'm working with on a book with a man from Japan, Sylvain Bergeron, and he's French Canadian, not Japanese, but he's lived there for 30 years, is married to a Japanese woman, have a grown daughter there. And his mother, or his grandmother, actually, as a child, her parents had moved to New York from Canada, and then they both died. And she and her brother were then on the streets in New York. So quite a life. But there was a woman, probably from Borneo, who was a shamaness. And she was very influential with his grandmother. And she told her, when I die, you will know. And when the girl was older, the grandmother, she went back to Canada. And indeed, she knew when that woman died because she received so much of her energy and her her ability. So she even worked for the police. She could find people and things. But she took Sylvain under her wing, and she saw that he was very intuitive, and so when she died, she granted him her gift. And so he started having visions and experiences when she died. And so he has a lot to talk about in terms of his experience in Japan too. So we're going to work on a book. We are working on a book together. So that's what I'm working on right now. And also there is a man, Anthony Chen, who's a filmmaker in France. He's making a film of Merchants of Light. Because I wanted that to be done because I wanted people to know we have a deep history of a profound spiritual relationship to the world. We knew these things before because when I was in school, people thought we'd never had anything. We never had anything about mysticism or anything else. That's all in the East. And no, that these are our roots. It's there. I also talk in the book about the San Bushmen, who they say, look, they could achieve cosmic consciousness. They've known for 65,000 years. Archaeologists say they were later than the cave cultures, but they're probably right. But at any rate, they probably influenced the West by influencing the cave cultures. I have a feeling they did come earlier. At least they were at the same time later. So I just want people to know there were deep roots of a very profound understanding and spirituality in the West, and we can achieve this once again.
I believe that so very much with everything that we're the conversation we're having today about these very things that are far more on the forefront of people's thinking and conversation than they ever have been in human history, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, certainly in my history, because I never heard any talk of such things when I was in school or college, or even right after. It really has intensified, for which I'm very grateful. And that was the message that we received too, is that this is the time.
Right. It's and it will be. If you're looking for the Hallmark fairy tale ending, I got news for you. It will be.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, because we seem to be conditioned to expect the worst.
Well, yeah. And I mean, again, that's just a puppeteering and manipulation of
Mhm.
individual. I mean, I find hypnosis is a great tool as a gateway entry level, identifying the conscious and unconscious process. I have 6 kids of my own. I've taught 5 of them how to hypnotize people, remote viewing, channeling, energetic healing. They've learned all these things. And I'm out here in Nevada, Las Vegas. So when we go for a family event, we'll go down on the strip and we'll play street magic with people and go up to someone, hey, would you like to feel bliss and complete harmony? And they're like, yeah. And then of course, they have their friends videotaping them. And as I ask that question, in the same breath of the same second, it's like sleep and they pass out standing up, and their friends are looking at them like, my good, what's going on? And then I'll be like, okay, so I'm going to erase your name. I'm going to take your wallet and keys. You're not going to know where you are. And when you wake up, I'm going to be Justin Bieber. And they're looking with their camera going, holy crap. When I get them to awake, they don't know their name. I'm holding their wallet and keys in their hand, which for anyone who's a psychologist, that's what we call a reverse hallucination. I'm waving in front of their face. They are not clear. They're like, what am I missing? They can't see it. And then they look to me and go, oh my goodness, it's Justin Bieber. Because this is another reverse hallucination. Now, what the purpose of that event is to have someone realize now in the same second, I will erase all their PTSD, give them more confidence than Superman, and they will go about their life from that present moment in an incredible state of awareness just from that fleeting moment. But the most important thing is to be aware of the human potential as consciousness, that you can access anything right now, instantaneously.
It's beautiful.
Like that's really something that's important for anyone to realize, that anyone has the ability to do it.
Yeah, well, that's a good message for sure. Absolutely. And for them to experience it, not just hear it from you. Yeah.
Well, it is. I'm a doer, not a don'ter.
Well,
As
that's
Yoda would say, there is no try, only do.
I like that. Well, I can see Kim is wasting over here.
Well, I want
And
to
then-
thank you so much for sharing your time with us today. I'm going to put all your social media, where people can find you on your website, all the books that you have written that access through Amazon. And is there anything that you want to share with the audience that perhaps maybe you're offering some sort of like website seminar or into sort of a mystical awakening?
No, I'm not. I'm not. Right now, I'm just busy finishing up this book, but hopefully they will read either of the 2 books, because I think that one reason that we wrote, that I wrote, we, yes, it's always we, not just an I who writes a book, Miracle of Death, is that our culture has such a fear of death because of the materialistic worldview, that I wanted to write that. So I thought when I was writing, if it helps one person, to not fall into grief as an end, but to realize that grief is a path and that it can take you to a whole new world. And I wanted them to understand that. And then with Merchants of Light, I really wanted to communicate that New Age is not New Age. It's very old indeed and very wise, and that we have all of that wisdom in our history, but also, as you say, within ourselves. So mainly those books, and I'm writing on the heart. So, but not giving a seminar. But at any rate, our website is Kamlak, KAMLAK.com.
Well, I want the audience, my students, the 126s, the subscribers to the channel to come out and take a look at the incredible offerings that Betty has on her website and her platform. And I just want to thank you again, my dear friend, for sharing your time with us today.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it very much, and I'm inspired by it. I'm going to go to your website and look into more of what you're doing. So.
Yes, I would love that. I welcome that. I want to thank you for sharing your time with us today. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing, and I will see you on the next one, guys.